Hey, what are you living for? Huh? I mean, you're always at home. What are you even doing? What are you talking about? I'm the one who does everything around the house. Where exactly? Ever since my husband was hospitalized, his child from a previous marriage has been treating me like a housemaid, and despite being a college student, spends all her time playing and hardly ever attends school. How on earth did she get the idea that I do nothing? Just calm down, will you? What? A lecture? No, it's not like that. The stepchild's face turned red, almost like a red demon. She has always had a tendency to immediately raise her voice and hysterically blame me at the slightest displeasure. Huh? It's your fault Dad's in the hospital again, isn't it? Don't mess with me. Why would it be my fault? I heard it's because of overwork. That's not true. It is. It's your fault. It's headache-inducing to be blamed in such a shrill voice without being listened to. To begin with, my husband's hospitalization is due to an illness he had before. Where did she get her misunderstanding? It seems futile to say anything right now. Since we're at it, I've wanted to say this for a while. You married Dad for his money, didn't you? That's not true. Just because you're somewhat attractive, you seduced Dad for his money, you shameless woman. The stepchild's tirade was unstoppable, and it seemed she might resort to physical violence at any moment. She also fails to grasp the most crucial point. I'm the one paying for her tuition, bills, even the rent for the house we live in. Have anything to say? Well, yeah. And then, she said something she shouldn't have. Like father, like son, huh? Having such a person as my sibling is the worst. He doesn't even show his face at home, maybe he's dead for all I know? We remarried, each having children from previous relationships. I couldn't stay silent when my son was insulted like that. There are things that are okay to say and things that are not. I felt something snap inside me. I intended to keep things peaceful for my husband's sake, but it seemed impossible. You've said something you shouldn't have. Huh? What's that supposed to mean, creepy? What are you gonna do about it, you useless old woman? I see. I thought a thorough punishment was necessary. Not something half-hearted. It's necessary to ensure she never defies me again. Not I see it all. That's when I stopped all the payments. This included the cost of my husband's surgery. As a result, the stepchild would lose everything. I'm Linda Taylor, turning 47 this year. Last year, I remarried with Mike. However, both of us had children from our previous marriages. Mike has a daughter, Emily, who's a student in college, and I have a son, Ethan, who's graduating from college next year. I found myself reminiscing about how I met Mike. Meeting Mike was purely coincidental. Honestly, I never thought I'd remarry at this age. Currently, I import and sell items online. That alone was enough for the business to thrive, but I strongly felt I wanted customers to physically handle the products. That's when I took notice of the variety store managed by Mike. Excuse me. Yes? Can I help you? Actually, I am a business owner. I said so, handing over my business card. Oh, you're the owner. Sorry for being so sudden. Because it was such a charming shop, I thought I'd like to have the goods I sourced from here. Mike seemed to be looking for some change as well, and luckily, we ended up signing a contract right there. After that, things went smoothly, and the products started selling quickly. As if in tandem, our relationship also progressed, and within a year of meeting, we were discussing marriage. I'm really happy, but I'm not getting any younger. I feel the same way. And I haven't mentioned it until now, but I have a son who's graduating from college next year, you know? I have a daughter about the same age, so it's pretty much the same situation. On delving deeper, it turned out Mike's previous wife had passed away. Hearing such a story made it hard for me to feel indifferent. I formally accepted Mike's proposal, and we decided to remarry. However, it wasn't without its issues. This is a bit hard to say, but could you not tell my daughter about your work? I'll do so if that's what you want. Is there any reason? Well, you'll understand once you meet her. Okay, I got it. This led to my first meeting with Mike's daughter, Emily. Nice to meet you. I'm Linda Taylor. Mike and I. Before I could finish, Emily cut in. No need for introductions. Just don't cause me any trouble. Hey. That's no way to speak. Then Emily apologized to me. However, it seemed she really disliked the idea, retreating to her room. Are you sure this is okay? It's fine. You remember what we talked about before, right? The thing about work? Yeah. Well, it's like she has a lot of pride, I guess. I quickly realized. She must really like you, Mike. Do you think so? What else? Maybe she felt like she was losing you. Emily is not a little kid anymore. She should understand that. I hope so. Eventually, we got married. Though our first meeting was the worst, once we started living together, Emily began to show consideration. I thought we could finally feel secure. In fact, during a simple family dinner, no particular problems arose. This marked the beginning of our life as a family of 4. What should I call you? Whatever you're comfortable with is fine. Then, can I call you Linda? Mom still feels a bit awkward. If that's what you prefer. And just call me Emily. Though there were moments of hesitation, Emily started to engage more actively. Having once wished for a daughter, this made me incredibly happy. However, there was one person who viewed our relationship with skepticism. That was Ethan. Mom, can we talk? What's up? It's about Emily. Ethan suddenly lowered his voice. You might want to be cautious. Cautious about what? I can't say specifically, but honestly, it's hard to know what she's thinking. Do you think so? I've given my warning, okay? Okay. Ethan has always been observant from a young age. He is able to intuitively spot troublesome people. I once dated someone who turned out to be a habitual debtor. And it was Ethan who advised me to break it off. Of course, I understood what he was saying, but we had only been living together for about 2 months. So I tried not to think too deeply about it. But as the new year dawned, Ethan's graduation from college was just around the corner. By the way, have you figured out where you're gonna live? Pretty much decided. Found some affordable places near the company. Really? Have you told your dad yet? Yeah, I've talked to him. Planning to move around mid-March. Ethan always takes care of everything himself, without needing me to say anything. So I wasn't too worried. My main concern was Emily. I couldn't help but sigh when comparing her to Ethan. You're thinking about Emily, aren't you? Yeah. Well, yeah. Hasn't she come back yet? Now that you mention it, she hasn't. Really have no clue what she's thinking. Emily returned after midnight. I'm home. Where have you been? You didn't answer your phone. Dad was worried too. Doesn't matter where I was. Mike tried to stop Emily as she headed to her room. Wait. First, why are you so late? Just hung out with friends and got back late. You should at least let us know. If this keeps happening, we'll have to set a curfew. Huh? Why? Well, it makes sense. Now, Emily even started being snarky to Ethan. They were never close, but it had gotten worse recently. However, I didn't yet realize that this was merely the prelude to what was coming. That night ended unsatisfactorily with Emily locking herself in her room. Soon after, the day came for Ethan to move out for his independent life. Mom, you okay? Just feeling a bit lonely, I guess. I'm not a kid anymore. I know, but still. I was widowed by my previous husband. He died in a tragic accident. It was when Ethan was still in elementary school. Since then, I've raised him on my own. Thanks to that, I am now running my own business. Are you leaving already? Yeah. It was a short time, but I had fun. Take care of Mom for me. Leave it to me. Come back anytime. Will do. It was a touching moment, but Emily was the one to dampen the mood. Emily, don't you want to say anything? Not really anything to say. She kept fiddling with her smartphone, not looking up. Ethan seemed exasperated. Well, all I can say is, don't trouble Mom and Dad. Huh? What's that supposed to mean? Just do your best, okay? I know. Bye then. With that, Ethan left. Soon after, Emily went out too. Where are you going? Out with friends. When will you be back? Why do I have to tell you that? Don't be late. I know, see you. Mike and I exchanged glances. Life from there on was neither particularly good nor bad. Emily was with the job hunting season approaching, but she showed no signs of starting. Concerned, I talked to Mike about it. Indeed, she's been out playing around a lot lately. I think we need to have a serious talk. Yeah. That night, we set up a meeting to discuss the situation. That's when a shocking truth came to light. Emily had failed to earn enough credits and was facing a definite year of delay. It seemed she had given up and resorted to hanging out as a way to cope. Why didn't you tell us something so important? Even if we concede that failing a year can happen, hiding it is the problem. Tuition isn't free, you know. Mike's lecture continued. Emily, not expecting to be reprimanded to this extent, was completely disheartened. Won't you say something? Pressured too much, tears welled up in Emily's eyes. Let's just assume she's already reflecting on it. I tried to offer some support, thinking of Emily, but then... Linda, stay out of this. What? Hey! She was considering your situation when she said that. That's not fair. Emily looked down and fell silent. For now, we're setting a curfew. What? It seems like you're not reflecting, so this is a decided matter. There was nothing Emily could do about it. Despite her rebellious attitude, she couldn't go against Mike's decision. From then on, she became utterly uncontrollable. She ignored everything I said. She would act nice when Mike was around, but when it was just the two of us, she completely ignored me. Concurrently, something unusual was happening to Mike as well. In fact, the signs had been there for a while. One day, when Mike returned from work, his face was pale, and he clearly looked ill. Soon after, he became immobile, and I had to call an ambulance. Hello, Emily? Your dad's collapsed, so you need to come to the hospital right away. What? What do you mean? I'll explain later. Though he received treatment, Mike's condition seemed quite serious. As a result, he was hospitalized. Why did this happen to Dad? He might need major surgery. Then you should take his place. What's gotten into you all of a sudden? Emily raised her voice and lashed out at me. The sudden change in her demeanor left me flustered. Afterwards, she stormed out of the hospital. I couldn't organize my thoughts about what had just happened. I really wanted to talk more about Mike. But that was now impossible. I couldn't understand why I was being criticized to this extent. The reason Mike was hospitalized was because he had cancer in his liver. The situation didn't seem good, but it appeared manageable with surgery. I can't believe this. After returning home, I shared with her the reality of what was happening to Mike. Even if you can't believe it, this is the truth. I'm not saying this without any basis. No matter the reason, this is all your fault, isn't it? No matter how carefully I explained, it fell on deaf ears. I was truly at my wits' end. Now, we would have to live together, just the two of us. Moreover, with Mike unable to work due to his hospitalization, I had to cover both the hospital bills and our daily living expenses. I decided to consult Ethan about it first. I got the gist of it. But what should we do? We've never lived with just the two of us before. Right. For now, I'll also talk to Dad, okay? That's probably best. I'll tell Dad to try not to burden you too much. Okay. Thanks for handling that. Life with Emily was proving to be full of challenges. I couldn't have managed alone. Ethan being there truly helped. But, is everything really going to be okay? As had always been the case, Emily did not help with any household chores. Despite my resolve to work twice as hard now that Mike was hospitalized, she ignored this and continued to make demands. I felt like I was practically a maid. She complained without lifting a finger to help. "I'm not hungry today, so I don't need dinner. You could have told me earlier." I tried to keep my irritation in check. But Emily seemed to provoke me knowingly. "Besides, it looks unappetizing. Has it always been like this?" That was not the case. She has always been picky with her food, a finicky eater from the start. It had only worsened since it became just the two of us. She would get angry if the ingredients were not bought from the specific supermarket she liked. "I bought everything you asked for. I don't want to deal with this hassle either." "But Dad..." "What?" I thought she said something in a voice so soft I could barely hear. "What did you say?" "It's nothing." Normally, she would have continued to complain, but she seemed perplexed for some reason. Then, I received a call from Ethan. "Are you okay right now?" "I guess so. We might have been mistaken about something." "What are you talking about?" "I'm not sure yet." "What are you talking about?" "I don't understand." "Yeah, exactly. Anyway, it seems we might have been deceived." "Really?" "Just make sure not to tell anyone about this conversation. Let's keep it between us for now." "All right." Deceived, but by whom? I wondered if Ethan was talking about Emily, but that didn't seem right. It felt more like she just didn't like me for some reason. I couldn't grasp what Ethan meant, but I had to focus on the immediate issues at hand. Emily's situation was overwhelming. 2 days after Ethan's call, I received a message from the hospital asking me to come in the morning. So I headed straight to Mike's room. "What could it be about?" "Probably about the surgery, I think." "I see. And how are you feeling now?" "Much better." "That's good to hear. So did Ethan say anything?" "Ethan?" That reminded me of the call from Ethan. "No, he didn't say anything special." "I see. Is there something you're worried about?" "Not really, but..." It felt like he was being unusually cautious, almost fearful. Then, the surgery was scheduled for 2 weeks later. "I guess I will cause trouble to you again." "You don't need to worry about that. Just focus on yourself right now." "Thanks. That really helps." I hoped that the surgery would improve his condition. When I told Emily about the surgery that night. "I see. Got it." She then went straight to her room. I had expected more of a reaction, but she was surprisingly subdued. She used to hurl harsh words at me almost daily, but suddenly, it all stopped. It would be great if this led to peace. But that only lasted until the surgery was over. On the day of the surgery, Emily and I went to the hospital room together. It was the first time we had come to the hospital, just the two of us, since Mike had been hospitalized. "I'm glad the surgery went well." "Yeah." Emily seemed relieved too. Mike woke up and we were able to talk a bit. However, I had to leave the room because of a phone call, leaving Emily behind. When I returned to the hospital room, I heard Mike's voice sounding angry at Emily. Despite the surgery just having been completed, I worried that excitement might be bad for him, so I opened the door. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, it's fine. Just checking if she's been going to school properly, right?" "Yeah." "Well, if that's the case." But would that conversation have made Emily look almost like she was going to cry? I wondered if they were actually talking about something else. However, I couldn't ask under the circumstances. "Anyway, you just had surgery today, so make sure to rest." "Yeah, I will." "Emily, don't forget what we talked about earlier." Emily silently nodded. It was on the way back home. I dared to ask about their hospital conversation. "What were you talking about at the hospital?" "I don't need to tell you that." You don't have to be like that. I was trying to improve my relationship with Emily, but it seemed not to be going well. And why Emily was so hostile towards me became increasingly clear. And at the same time, it ignited a flame of vengeance within me. Ultimately, my relationship with Emily remained unchanged. In fact, her hostility towards me seemed to become even more blatant than before. This change occurred after Mike's surgery was successfully completed. 3 months later, Mike was able to be discharged from the hospital. The doctor was amazed at his recovery. I didn't expect you to be discharged this soon. I'm surprised by my own body too. You'll still need to take it easy for a while. I know, but I'm worried about the shop. I've been so preoccupied with my own issues, so I haven't been able to help with that. Should I help you? No, that's okay. I'll handle it. But really, it's fine. Leave it to me. If you insist. I thought it was odd how he was so insistent on doing everything by himself. I hoped that Emily would calm down and things would become a bit more peaceful with Mike's return home, but that was not the case at all. Less than a month later, his condition worsened, leading to another hospitalization. Perhaps he had overexerted himself before fully recovering. The primary issue, however, was that his liver, which had been operated on, wasn't in good condition. And then, it was the night he was readmitted. Hey, what are you living for? Huh? I mean, you're always at home, what are you even doing? What are you talking about? I'm the one who does everything around the house. Where exactly? No matter what I say, she doesn't listen at all. What does she really want? Just calm down, will you? What? A lecture? No, it's not like that. Emily's face turned red, almost like a red demon. She had raised her voice and blamed me hysterically before, but this was beyond comparison. Huh? It's your fault Dad's in the hospital again, isn't it? Don't mess with me. Why would it be my fault? I heard it was because of overwork. That's not true. It is. It's your fault. The reason he's hospitalized is because of a worsening liver condition. It's headache-inducing to be blamed in such a shrill voice without being listened to. The true cause of his hospitalization was a pre-existing chronic illness. Where did she get her misunderstanding? It seemed like nothing I could say would be accepted. I've wanted to say this for a while now, but you married Dad for his money, didn't you? That's ridiculous. Just because you're somewhat attractive, you seduced Dad for his money, you shameless woman. Emily's tirade was unstoppable, and it seemed she might become physically aggressive at any moment. She was missing the most crucial point. I was the one paying for Emily's college tuition, phone bills, even the rent for the house we live in. Have anything to say? Well, yeah. And then Emily said something she shouldn't have. Like father, like son, huh? Having someone like that for my brother is the worst. Ethan doesn't even show his face at home, maybe he's dead for all I know. We remarried, each having children from previous relationships. I couldn't stay silent when Ethan was insulted like that. There are things that are okay to say and things that are not. I felt something snap inside me. I intended to keep things peaceful for Mike's sake, but it seemed impossible now. You've said something you shouldn't have. Huh? What's that supposed to mean, creepy? What are you gonna do about it, you useless old woman? I see. I thought a thorough punishment was necessary. Not something half-hearted. It's necessary to ensure she never defies me again. Not I see at all. That's when I decided to stop all payments. This included the cost of my husband's second surgery. As a result, the stepchild would lose everything. Or maybe you should just leave. I'd be happier that way. Maybe I will. But then, you'd have to manage your living expenses yourself. Wait a minute. It's too late for that. You asked for this. I took only my smartphone and wallet and left the house. First thing, I decided to call Ethan. Mom? Good timing. Huh? Can we meet in person? It will be faster to talk that way. That's fine. Actually, I've just left the house. I've reached my limit with Emily. I see. But that might be a wise decision. How about the cafe near the station? Okay. I'll be there soon. Ethan and I agreed to meet. This cafe was a place full of memories where we used to come before the remarriage. Arriving first, I ordered the usual coffee and spent some time trying to forget everything that had happened. Sorry, I'm late. It's okay. I had a chance to relax for a bit. So, what's the talk about? Well, listen carefully. First, take a look at this. Ethan showed me his smartphone. It displayed Mike's shop. And the shop was closed due to his hospitalization. What about it? Yeah, you might not understand like this. Let me zoom in. Zooming in, there was a notice in the center of the shutter. Seeing it felt like my heart was being gripped. This means, as you can see, it's been put up for sale. When? About 3 weeks ago, I guess. That was around the time Mike was hospitalized for the second time. But I don't understand why he would do something like this. I can't say for sure either. But there's more, and this might be even more important. What is it? Now, listen to this. A recording? Ethan played the recording. There was static, and although the voice was intermittent, it was definitely audible. Listen carefully. You need to be disliked even more, or it's pointless. Got it? That's Dad's voice, isn't it? Yes. I was concerned, so when I went to the hospital, I heard it and recorded it. The you he's referring to is Emily, right? What's going on? I'm not sure, but you left the house, right? Maybe it's time to take some kind of action? So, you're saying to just watch how things unfold? That would be best. I thought about it. What if all of Emily's harsh words towards me were under Mike's instruction? I felt chills all over my body. This must have been what Ethan meant when he said we might have been deceived. But I was dying to know how he found out about it. Can I ask something? Of course. You mentioned before that we might be deceived, but how did you know? When I went for a get-well visit, I overheard a conversation between Dad and Emily. It sounded suspicious to me. I can't believe something like that happened. It was after you mentioned having trouble with Emily. Looking back, I think that's when you must have been giving her some sort of instructions. After that, I decided to stay in a nearby hotel to wait and see what actions Mike and Emily would take. Within a week, there was movement. Hello? What's going on? I heard you left the house because of Emily. Her verbal abuse was too much, and I just couldn't tolerate it anymore. So, I stopped paying for things like rent and tuition. Isn't that a bit excessive? Is it? Seems normal to me. Oh, and I decided to leave your surgery fees for Emily to handle. What? I couldn't bring myself to talk about the store or what Ethan had told me at that moment. Can't we just talk a bit more calmly about this? I guess, but Emily has to come too. I'll make sure to contact Emily myself. So, we decided to have another discussion. 3 days after the call, I went to the hospital with Ethan. This should clear everything up. Like a final showdown, maybe. Could be. When we entered Mike's room, Emily was already there. Ethan's here too? Yeah. So, what's this about? I've given Emily a stern warning, so I hope you can forgive her this time. You've reflected enough, right? Emily didn't respond. Are you really sorry? What do you say? I asked Emily, but she kept looking down. I have a question too. The shop is up for sale, right? You knew. Why? Well, that's because... According to Mike, the decision to sell was due to a decrease in sales. However, the shop had been fairly profitable before his hospitalization. That doesn't make sense. Sales were not bad. What's the real reason? Mike fell silent. That's when I played the recording Ethan had made. Let me help you to say it. Huh? Mike's voice filled the room. There's no point in hiding it anymore. Maybe it's better to tell everything, isn't it? Mike seemed ready to give up. The truth is, marrying Linda was all about the money. I never expected someone to take an interest in a shop that could go under at any time. I wasn't aware of that. Of course, I never told anyone. Even if that was the case, the sales were good, right? There's a trick to that. What Mike then revealed was shocking. Mike had been buying products himself to inflate sales figures. Why would you do that? To gain your trust. You didn't have to do that. But why involve Emily? To divert suspicion and garner sympathy for my surgery. I was really strapped for cash when I met you, Linda. So, you used Emily. How much did you know, Emily? I knew nothing. I just did as Dad told me. But that seemed excessive. In fact, Emily, trying to adhere strictly to what Mike told her, ended up going too far. Given she was acting on instructions, it's understandable she might become hysterical, absorbing all my directed hate. Mike also scolded her to fully play the villain. However, that didn't mean I was ready to forgive everything. But why sell the shop? Maybe as collateral for a loan. Exactly. I was at a loss for words. A simple consultation could have avoided all these roundabout measures. Now we see who the real villain is. Indeed. What? He was a man who hid his true nature even from his own daughter, driven by twisted motives to act recklessly. Sadly, I can no longer live with you guys. Wait. At least let's talk. We've talked enough. From now on, you're on your own. Surgery costs, tuition, rent, everything. It was when Ethan and I were about to leave the hospital room. Emily started complaining to Mike in a shrill voice. Ethan and I exchanged looks. Who do you think caused all this? I did everything you told me to. This is absurd. It's because you went too far. If you had just followed my instructions. Huh? I did what you told me, and this happened. A distressing parent-child argument unfolded. Maybe take this argument somewhere else? This is a hospital, after all. It's disturbing. You be quiet. This is partly your fault. I sighed deeply. I was willing to forgive if you had a pay. What are you living for? Huh? I mean, you're always at home. What are you even doing? What are you talking about? I'm the one who does everything around the house. Where exactly? Ever since my husband was hospitalized, his child from a previous marriage has been treating me like a housemaid, and despite being a college student, spends all her time playing and hardly ever attends school. How on earth did she get the idea that I do nothing? Just calm down, will you? What? A lecture? No, it's not like that. The stepchild's face turned red, almost like a red demon. She has always had a tendency to immediately raise her voice and hysterically blame me at the slightest displeasure. Huh? It's your fault Dad's in the hospital again, isn't it? Don't mess with me. Why would it be my fault? I heard it's because of overwork. That's not true. It is. It's your fault. It's headache-inducing to be blamed in such a shrill voice without being listened to. To begin with, my husband's hospitalization is due to an illness he had before. Where did she get her misunderstanding? It seems futile to say anything right now. Since we're at it, I've wanted to say this for a while. You married Dad for his money, didn't you? That's not true. Just because you're somewhat attractive, you seduced Dad for his money, you shameless woman. The stepchild's tirade was unstoppable, and it seemed she might resort to physical violence at any moment. She also fails to grasp the most crucial point. I'm the one paying for her tuition, bills, even the rent for the house we live in. Have anything to say? Well, yeah. Hospital for just car sickness? We don't need that. Although he prioritizes father-daughter trips over work, my daughter always looks exhausted when she comes home. One day, after returning from a trip, my daughter looked pale, so I asked if she needed to go to the hospital. Then my husband raised his voice, saying, "No need for that." When he asked our daughter if she agreed, she slightly shivered and nodded. "We won't go to the hospital. Just let her sleep, she'll be fine." But as I insisted, my husband, annoyed, snatched our daughter's insurance card and left the house, saying he didn't want her taken to the hospital without him. 3 days later, my daughter's condition suddenly worsened, and at the hospital, she was found to be in a critical state. Upon returning home, I found police surrounding my husband, trying to shove him into a patrol car. As a child, during a family trip, I had a near-death experience while traveling. I am alive today thanks to a nurse on board. The hospital where I was taken initially provided excellent care, saving my life, as my parents told me later. I wanted to thank her, but the nurse, who had introduced herself, moved on to another patient, and I never got her name. From that experience, I dreamed of becoming a nurse to meet my lifesaver again and to be like the nurse who helped me. So I vowed to continue nursing even after getting married and having children. That was a non-negotiable belief of mine. After becoming a nurse, life was incredibly busy, leaving no time for a boyfriend. I thought if my life ended unmarried, I'd have no regrets. Nursing felt like a calling, but it was someone unconventional who pursued me vigorously because of this. He is now my husband. My husband was younger and used to visit the hospital selling medical equipment. Initially, he earned less than I did, so we both worked hard for a while. In my 20s, I wanted to have a child, but I sealed that desire away, fearing it would pressure my husband. Perhaps that was wrong, as later his hard work was recognized at work, leading to promotions and a higher income than mine. He then suggested, given his earnings, that we could start a family. I was overjoyed, yet strangely, I struggled to conceive. Finally, in my mid-30s, I successfully became pregnant, and my husband, overly protective and worried, cherished me throughout the pregnancy. I was deeply grateful for meeting, marrying, and having a daughter with him. I felt overwhelmingly happy, almost unsure if I deserved such joy. Our daughter was incredibly adorable, inheriting the best traits from both of us, making me proud even if others called me doting. My husband actively participated in parenting, being the ideal partner. Thanks to him, I returned to work sooner than expected, requesting a transfer to a daytime shift with more flexible hours, which was readily approved. My in-laws, living nearby, were very understanding of our working parent status, allowing us to rely on them when necessary. I felt immensely fortunate for this supportive environment. When our daughter started kindergarten, my husband suggested it might be time for her to start some educational lessons outside school. I remembered hearing from nurse colleagues that kids these days often start learning second language in kindergarten. The thought of my daughter needing to start such activities made me weary. A lesson is something that will not last long unless the person in question is interested in it. This was true in my childhood. My grandparents thought that since I was a girl, I should be given girly lessons, but my parents often argued that I should be allowed to do what I wanted to do. Eventually, I never took up any hobbies except for a tutoring school for exams. So, I didn't plan to force my daughter into anything unless she showed interest. Yet my husband's ideas were surprisingly similar to my grandparents. "Since you're a girl, how about piano, flower arrangement, or ballroom dancing?" Ballroom dancing? Not ballet? My husband says that ballet is too vulgar for a girl in tights and lifting her legs. I want my daughter to grow up to be neat and pretty. I don't want her to expose her skin to an unspecified number of men. For my part, I think it is best for children to grow up in a carefree environment. It would be better if they could study and play sports a little, but I don't intend to force them to do so. However, it is good for them to learn some sports because it is good for their health and immune system. When I was a child, I had a hard time in pool because I couldn't swim. So I suggested she might try swimming for now, but he rejected it, citing concerns about too much skin exposure in a swimsuit. Eventually, we agreed not to enroll her in any lessons during kindergarten, as forcing activities on her at such a young age seemed unwise. Differing views on a child's education are common, settled by advice from experienced mothers and my husband's parenting finished superiors. Our daughter made many friends in kindergarten, always laughing and playing, growing up healthily. She has become so well known as a beautiful girl in the street, and even to us, her parents, she has become a beautiful face. In elementary school, she became interested in piano as her close friends started lessons, leading her to start as well. Buying a grand piano was impossible, but my husband, without consulting me, bought a used one. This led to a mild argument, witnessed by our daughter, making her feel obligated to continue. I believed it was better to wait until she was genuinely engaged before purchasing. A compact electronic piano would have sufficed. She continued piano lessons until graduating from elementary school, more out of obligation to her father than passion. She wasn't particularly talented in piano, nor strong enough for competitions. She participated in school recitals, mainly to please her father, even though younger children often performed better. When she entered middle school and her piano teacher closed the studio, she quit piano. She then focused on school clubs and studying, aiming for a high school she wanted to attend. Seeing her find and pursue her interests, I resumed night shifts, returning to my original department and shift pattern before maternity leave. With my husband still finishing work on time, I could commit to night shifts without worry. I'm very grateful to him. During her elementary years, my husband had restricted her from sports, fearing injury, especially ball games, even requesting her teachers to excuse her from such activities at school. Entering middle school, she eagerly joined the popular softball team. Though she was slim in elementary school, she's now eating well, growing stronger, and her tan skin radiates health. My husband, seeing her thrive in softball, stopped insisting on traditionally feminine activities. 2 months into middle school, a rift began to form in our family. It started when even on my off nights, dinner was separately prepared for me. My daughter and I will handle our dinner. You can eat whatever you like, my husband said. Then I'll join you for the meal you've prepared. You want to take over the meal I prepared for my daughter? I didn't mean that. After a few such exchanges, it became the norm for me to eat alone, regardless of how early I returned home, as they would have finished their meal. On weekends, my husband began taking our daughter on trips. We couldn't travel much during her piano days in elementary school, so I want her to make up for it. What about me? You should just work as much as you like. Nursing is your calling, right? You wouldn't take off work for a trip, would you? It's your calling, after all, you shouldn't take a break. My husband used my passionate speech about nursing before we got married to justify not taking me on trips. Indeed, I could immerse myself in work when my husband and daughter were away. Initially, I followed my husband's suggestion to work night shifts on weekends, but it became an issue that I was always the one working those shifts. Everyone should equally share weekend night shifts. It's unfair for the same person to always work them. Once the shift schedule was adjusted, I found myself alone at home on weekends, which felt incredibly lonely and made time seem to drag on. As my daughter's summer vacation began, my husband not only took weekends off but also started taking weekdays off to travel more frequently with her. Sometimes overnight or day trips, often without telling me. Around 1/3 into the summer break, they returned from a day trip, and my daughter looked very sick, pale, and bloodless. What happened? You look really unwell. It's just car sickness. I suggested staying overnight, but she insisted on coming home. It's her own doing. I couldn't understand how he could treat our beloved daughter so coldly. Feeling distrustful of his attitude, I decided to check on my daughter directly. Knocking on her room's door, I got a response. Are you okay? Yes. But I don't want to eat. You don't want to eat? Are you sure you're not forcing yourself? I'm not. I just need to sleep. Please leave me alone. She's a teenager. She might have things she can't easily share with her mother. I decided to let her be for the night and see how she felt. However, She didn't emerge from her room even when it was time for club activities the next morning. I prepared lunch for her and left for work, calling during the day, but she never answered. Returning home, my husband was already back and retreated to his room after stating they had finished dinner. Asking about my daughter, he replied she was fine and not to bother her. Bother her? I was puzzled but couldn't get more information as he seemed averse to discussing it further. In the kitchen, I found the lunch I prepared for her untouched and thrown away. I immediately went to check on her. "Are you really okay? Can I see you?" But she refused, saying she wanted to sleep. The next morning, she appeared even more exhausted and slightly thinner than 2 days ago. She appeared to have lost some weight. "Is it so bad you can't eat? Should we go to the hospital?" "I'm fine. I just don't feel like eating right now. I'm going to skip club activities today." I really wanted to take her to the hospital by force. But if she insists she's fine, I couldn't just drag her there against her will. Reluctantly, I respected her wish for that day. However, the situation changed the next night. When my daughter entered the bathroom without a towel, I went to deliver it and saw her in the changing area, about to undress. Startled, I apologized, but was shocked at her emaciated appearance. My daughter's body was so emaciated that it would be no exaggeration to say that she was nothing but bones and skin. "Let's go to the hospital before you bathe. It's dangerous in your condition. I'll get the car ready in the garage." "No. I don't want to go to the hospital. I chose to be this way." "Don't lie. You can't play softball in that condition." While I was trying to persuade my resistant daughter to go to the hospital, my husband appeared, saying she's fine because she said so. She says she's fine with it. At her age, she probably wants to lose weight. I countered that a wrong diet is not good for her health. My husband then asked, "You're a mother and you don't understand the female mind of your daughter at her age?" He then began to talk about me as if I were an unfit mother. A nurse would know what it's like to be in such a state, wouldn't she? How can you say that nursing is a vocation if you don't know unless you go to the hospital? His rationale kept shifting, from her being fine to him deciding what's best. As a parent and medical professional, my instinct was to take her to the hospital, even by force. But sensing my intention, my husband took the insurance cards from the drawer and left. I regretted not linking my daughter's insurance to mine. Despite the cost, I decided she needed to see a doctor. I tried convincing her with promises of a female doctor and assured her not to worry about money, but she steadfastly refused. Overwhelmed by her crying refusal, I gave in, deciding to persuade her over time. But things took a drastic turn. While I was briefly away, she bathed and collapsed. Assuming she overheated, I drove her to my hospital. Although my husband still had her insurance card, I knew we could settle the difference later. The hospital accepts credit card payments, so no matter the cost, my daughter's life is irreplaceable. I had requested female doctors for any emergencies involving my daughter, so upon our arrival, they immediately accommodated us. The diagnosis revealed she had fainted due to anemia. However, the doctor's explanation continued. Shockingly, my daughter was suffering from malnutrition. I thought she was just on a strict diet. But I always packed her nutritious lunches for school, and our meals at home were healthy. Although my husband also cooked, I did it more frequently. What was going on? Then, with tears, my daughter begged for help. I've been too scared to speak up about Dad. But I can't handle it anymore. I knew my husband had high expectations for her. But I never imagined he was enforcing them. He had set an ideal body measurement for her and was forcing her into harmful dieting practices. My pelvis is wide, and I can't slim down that area. He said I'd have to shave down my bones to get thinner. She mentioned that my husband suggested doing it himself to save hospital costs. It might sound like a joke, but for my daughter, my husband's words were absolute, dominating her reality. The reason we stopped having meals together was to conceal her extreme dieting from me. She was also discarding parts of her lunch I packed, to avoid going hungry from skipped dinners, complying with my husband's demands. Gradually losing strength, she couldn't even keep up with warm-up exercises in her club activities and felt she had no choice but to quit. Their solo trips were for attending model auditions. Though told to quit the club to avoid tanning, she used sunscreen to continue secretly. As the dieting became harsher, she reached her physical limits and couldn't maintain it. Feeling powerless against my husband, she was becoming apathetic. But she sensed it was only a matter of time before I discovered everything. However, she feared my husband wouldn't pay for her desired high school if he found out. I was ashamed of thinking my husband, who actively engaged in housework and childcare, was the ideal, supportive spouse. His involvement had ulterior motives. Crafting his version of a perfect daughter during my absence, not out of respect for my wishes. My husband saw our daughter as an object he could mold at will, igniting my fury. She is not a doll but a sentient individual, not property of her parents. Realizing he didn't understand this basic fact was utterly disillusioning. I apologized to my daughter for not noticing sooner. There were signs. Like the issues with meals and vacations. I should have asked why she didn't mind getting tanned in club activities. Instead of outright opposition, my husband subtly manipulated her to quit. I then clearly told my daughter that we would divorce her father and not to worry about her school fees. Returning to my original department and working night shifts, I was earning more than my husband, who had used up all his leave for the auditions and trips, significantly reducing his basic salary. After a night's observation in the hospital, my daughter and I returned home to find a commotion and a crowd outside. Pushing through, we saw police cars and my husband being questioned by officers. A neighbor noticed me and my daughter and told us about the situation. When my husband returns home, the house is dark and our daughter is not there. He checked his daughter's room, but since there were no signs of personal belongings taken out of the house, he thought it was a sudden runaway and started looking for her. He asked around in the neighborhood and forced his way into one house. It was the home of the daughter's childhood friend. The husband did not think well of the childhood friend, but the daughter and the other child had been very close until kindergarten. He didn't like the friend, assuming he was a girl because of his feminine appearance in his younger years. Discovering the friend was actually a boy, he raged, deeming any association too premature. Our daughter, perhaps embarrassed or feeling guilty, had kept her distance since elementary school. My husband barged into the friend's home, accusing them of hiding our daughter out of spite. But the friend had moved away years ago. Only their grandparents lived there now. His rampage led to the police being called. In talking with the officer, my husband explained that we don't want any boys on our daughter to make her a model. So he went around the house checking out. He claimed to have checked several houses, with the friends seeming most suspicious, showing no remorse. Additionally, during auditions, he was approached by an agency promising to launch her career in exchange for debt collection. In fact, it turns out that it was not a debt, but a piece of fraud. It was revealed to be a scam, and several police sketches resembling my husband had led to filed complaints.
You gotta help me out here. I did all this for the sake of my little girl. And I didn't know it was a scam.
Even if you didn't know it was a scam, if you made illegal collections, you are guilty, right? I replied coldly. I don't want a criminal father for my daughter. Divorce, I declared. My daughter would no longer be at her father's beck and call. She has never wanted to be a model. I told her that I preferred cool to cute and that I really wanted to learn Aikido and karate. To the end, my husband asked his daughter for help, saying that she would just be told to tell me to say so. However, when my daughter refused to look at my husband even once, my husband's shoulders slumped and he was taken away by the police. Later, the doctor who examined my daughter contacted the police, who also questioned my husband about his treatment of my daughter. My husband still does not admit guilt to my daughter, saying that it was an education for the child. He admitted that he had gone too far in breaking and entering, even though it was a misunderstanding, but he continues to plead justification, saying that he does not think he did anything wrong and that it is natural behavior for a parent to do. As for being a part of the fraud, he says he did not intend to do so. Even though he didn't know, the way he collected the money was so outrageous that it cannot be overlooked, and the police are investigating him even more severely. Is there a big organization behind this? The police are continuing to thoroughly investigate the case with such a viewpoint in mind. My divorce from my husband was finalized through an attorney. Neither my daughter nor I have visited my husband even once. My husband told us through his lawyer that he wanted us to come, but we didn't go because there was nothing to talk about when we showed up. After that, I received a number of letters from my husband, who had grown numb. Each letter is long, about 10 sheets of letterhead, but there's no apology and reconciliation, and the contents are similar or the same each time. While apologizing, my ex-husband's skewed expressions of affection for our daughter made her feel uneasy, saying it was creepy. I couldn't bear to read them, so I returned them, but they kept coming back, so I decided to tear them up as soon as they arrived. My in-laws gave me a very polite apology. Even after divorcing my husband, my daughter remains their grandchild. She was fond of her grandparents. They told us to ask for help anytime we needed it. But given what had happened with my husband, I vowed to live independently. Although I wouldn't stop my daughter from seeing her grandparents if she wished. Thus, my daughter and I moved out of the family home to start anew near the high school she wanted to attend. She set new goals, excelling in her studies and club activities, and seemed to have made good friends, often chatting with them in front of our house after school. 2 years later, my daughter was studying hard as usual. Thanks to a department change that eliminated overtime and night shifts, she successfully got into her desired school.
Mom, thank you.
What for, suddenly?
You've always put me first this past year and kept a close eye on me.
Isn't it your turn now? Actually, a year ago, there was talk of me being promoted to head nurse. But I declined, prioritizing my daughter's study and requested a transfer to a more flexible department. It seems she somehow heard about that conversation. I'm okay now. I've made up my mind about what I want to do and won't be swayed anymore.
So, now it's your turn to fulfill your dream and save many lives.
Driven by my daughter's words, I returned to my original department when she started high school. Even though there are days I don't see her due to night shifts, I'm thrilled that she helps out at home as much as she can. Coming home in the morning and eating the breakfast she made, I think about what we'll eat and talk about tonight, feeling truly happy. I will continue to watch my daughter grow up and to be a nurse like the nurse who saved my life as a young girl, and today I live firmly on 2 feet, a nurse and a mother.
Get out! You're not my daughter anymore.
The one yelling with so much force that spit flies is my mother. Her face is beet red with anger, and she's holding a knife with both hands, the points directed at me.
I can't support a leech who doesn't even contribute to the living expenses.
Far from not contributing, I am actually putting in more than half of my income, which amounts to $3,000 every month, into our household. She knows this. I've explained it to her countless times, but it seems like nothing gets through to her now. There have been some times she wouldn't listen to anything out of anger, but I never expected she'd even bring a knife. For now, I just try to not provoke her further and quietly create some distance to avoid getting injured. I heard my mother's cold voice.
If I knew you'd turn out to be such a parasite, I would have never had you.
I'm Hannah, 29 years old. Thanks to my hard work, I now work as a software engineer at a well-known corporation. My decision to pursue this career was influenced by my dad. He's always loved tinkering with computers. He was fascinated with machines since he was a kid, and he was thrilled the first time he saw a computer. I was excited back then, but the latest computers are amazing. Look, this one is so thin yet the screen is so clear. He'd say with a smile. And he used to take me to electronics stores. He would show me the latest computer models, pointing out their features. Seeing my dad so happy working with computers sparked my own interest. Although he was usually quiet, he would teach me all about them when it came to computers. Eventually, I realized I was better at using computers than most people my age, and I wanted to learn more deeply, leading me to major in engineering in college. When job hunting, I chose a career related to computers without hesitation. I successfully landed a job as a software engineer at my current company. Most of my work is remote, and I've enjoyed it, managing to achieve a lot compared to my peers. The times I'd go home and talk about work with my dad were some of the best. Then, one day, my dad collapsed. I got a call from Mom and rushed to the hospital.
Is Dad okay? He suddenly fell over, and I called an ambulance right away. They ran tests as soon as we arrived at the hospital and said it's subarachnoid hemorrhage. He needs urgent surgery, and he's in the operating room now. What are we going to do about our life from now on?
Oh, Dad. I waited, praying for his safety. A few hours later, the doctor came to update us on my dad's condition. The surgery was successful, but there might be some lasting effects on his arms and legs. The most important thing was that he was alive. That gave me some peace of mind. My mom said beside me, "What about work? I wonder if he'll be able to work again. I'm worried. If we lose our income source, how am I supposed to live?" My mom was concerned about her own future. She's always been like this. She always thinks of herself first, before the family. Seeing her like this made me sad all over again. I visited a few times while my dad was hospitalized, and just as the doctor said, he seemed to have trouble moving his arms and legs. He's been working hard on his rehabilitation before discharge, but it was clear he would have some disabilities. During his stay, my mom would bring only the bare minimum necessities and leave quickly. Considering the commute to his job would be too much for him in his condition, and realizing he couldn't continue working, my dad had no choice but to resign. Since he would need care and couldn't live alone, I had discussed it with my mom. "It's gonna be hard for Dad to live alone with his condition, so I hope you can help him out." But I wasn't really expecting an answer to begin with. "I've got my hands full too, and I can't be bothered with taking care of him." Mom snapped back instantly. I was disheartened. Mom was never the type to put family first, even when I was little. She always put herself above everyone else. However, I believed she had some love for Dad and thought she'd reach out to help him now that he was in this condition. But she refused my request for care as well. "Yeah, I get it. Then I'll just move back in and take care of Dad myself. That would really help me out. When can you start living here?" Since my job was basically remote, I figured I could balance work and caregiving as long as I had a laptop and could conduct online meetings. I knew it'd be a tough life balancing work and caregiving, but for my beloved father, I decided to move back in with my parents. The day I moved back home, while packing up, Mom said to me, "For breakfast, make sure we can eat by 7 a.m. It'd be good to have eggs and salad, considering health. And keep the trash in small bags to avoid smells. Oh, and burnable trash goes out on Mondays and Thursdays, so make sure to take it out. And remember, cleaning is a daily task." I'm so glad you're back. Mom had said she'd take care of herself when I moved back, but suddenly, she started dumping all the housework on me. Yet, for all her demands, I noticed the house was a mess. It seemed she hadn't been doing much cleaning herself. As expected, I ended up doing all the chores while Mom did nothing. In fact, she was hardly ever home, living her life as she pleased. Now, not only was I working and caring for Dad, but I was also stuck with all the housework, making every day incredibly busy. My dad, who had lost a bit of weight, would apologize, saying, "I'm sorry for the trouble. You have work too," but I just smiled and shook my head. "Don't apologize. It's not your fault. I'm happy I came back home. I enjoy our talks." When I told him that, my dad seemed a bit relieved. Caring for Dad wasn't too hard since he wasn't bedridden or unable to eat by himself. It was more about lending a hand with daily activities, which wasn't as difficult as I feared, and I cherished spending a lot of time with him like when I was a child. Meanwhile, Mom, who did nothing, was always complaining. "Hannah, your cooking is kinda bland and simple. Don't you think Dad isn't getting enough nutrients? You're such an unfilial daughter. It irks me to see my mom quickly eating up my cooking while making comments. However, when Dad was brought into the conversation, even I had to take things seriously. Considering his age, he doesn't eat much, but I thought it might be easier for him to eat if I increased the number of small dishes rather than serving big platters of food, so I added more items, but Mom didn't say anything. Instead, a few days later, she said, "Lately, there's just too much food. Dad and I are old, we can't eat all this. Don't you know how to save money, even though you've been living on your own?" I couldn't help but retort when she said that, all the while finishing off her meal completely.
It was your idea to increase the number of dishes. I did it so Dad would have a variety and not get tired of the food.
Then Mom visibly sighed and stood up from the table.
What's with that tone? It's like you're saying you only did it because I complained. How ungrateful. Unbelievable. It's because of your attitude, always taking things the wrong way, that you're still unmarried.
Mom, clearly angry, stomped off towards the couch in front of the TV. She left the dishes on the table. She plopped down on the sofa roughly and just looked at me before shouting, "Coffee." While I was clearing the table, thinking who would even bother preparing it for her, she threw a cushion at me.
Hey, hurry up and make the coffee. You're almost always at home, not even working. You talk about taking care of Dad, but are you just after his pension? And yet you can't even manage the household properly? How ridiculous. We've been over this a million times. I've switched to working from home. When I'm in my room, I'm either in meetings or getting work done.
No matter how I explained, Mom refused to understand the concept of working from home. In her eyes, I returned home under the guise of caregiving, without contributing financially, making me an unfilial child. I'm the one actually caring for Dad, yet she thinks I'm using his pension for myself. In reality, I'm the one taking care of Dad, earning for my parents' living expenses, and managing the household chores, all by myself. I've been put through Mom's whims since I was little, but I've reached my limit. I feel bad for Dad, but I can't live with the three of us under the same roof. A few days after making this decision, I accompanied Dad to his physiotherapy. He's motivated, and while dramatic improvements are unlikely, at least he's preventing any decline. As we returned home, promising to keep up the effort, I saw Mom leaving the house in a hurry with large bags. It's not unusual for her to be out or to come back from the department store with big bags, so I didn't think much of it. However, the next day, when I went to grab something from my closet, I realized all my bags and accessories were gone.
What? Why?
They weren't things I wore daily, nor had I moved them, so they should have been there. Then I remembered Mom's hurried departure the day before and confronted her.
Mom, were you in my room yesterday?
What are you talking about all of a sudden? This is my house. I can go into any room I want.
Then what's with the bag?
Mom was holding a bag from a high-end brand. It was clearly something she bought that day.
You always tell me not to waste money, and yet you have the money to buy luxury items?
Well, you're the one wasting money, so I decided to make sure you'd pay for it. Confused by her words, I frowned, and she started laughing cheerfully. You had some pretty nice bags. Just the bags and accessories alone brought in a good amount of money. Unbelievably, Mom had sold my accessories without my permission to buy things for herself. I was furious and shouted, "What the heck, that's unbelievable. It's worse than theft, selling them without my permission. Pay me back." Then Mom's face twisted in rage. How dare you talk back to your parents like that? In my time, we absolutely obeyed our parents. I worked and took care of them. I'm taking care of Dad, and you do nothing but complain. She slammed the table with all her might.
Why don't you help with Dad's care then? Do you remember ever helping since I got back? Who prepared his clothes? Who helped him stand up from his chair? You don't do any of that, yet you claim to be taking care of things. The one being taken care of the most in this house is you.
I couldn't stand it and slammed my hand down on the table, staring at her. Mom had a rough relationship with Dad's mom. You could say she was pretty much bullied by her mother-in-law. I didn't have much to say about that, but I couldn't stand her claiming she was taking care of Dad. Dad had given up on receiving any real care from Mom a long time ago. Still, he tried to engage in small talk, bringing up TV shows or stories from friends he heard during physiotherapy. But as soon as Dad started talking, Mom would just disappear from the room. I wondered how she could claim to be taking care of him with such confidence without actually doing anything. While I was lost in thought, Mom kept silent. Then, slowly lifting her hands from the table without saying a word, she turned her back to me and walked into the kitchen. Just as I sighed, thinking she was just going to ignore the conversation, Mom came back way sooner than I expected. She was rushing towards me, holding a knife with both hands.
Mom?
Her face, pointed at me with the knife, was redder than I had ever seen it. Trembling with anger, she shouted louder than I've ever heard before.
Get out of this house. You're just a parasite living here for Dad's pension.
At that moment, I realized none of my words had ever reached her. To Mom, no matter how much I took care of Dad or how much I worked, I was nothing but a pest.
I'll find a new place and move out as soon as I can,
I said as I slowly backed away, putting some distance between us. Then, seeing that Mom didn't move, I ran to my room. I thought I wouldn't feel anything being rejected by Mom given our strained relationship, but tears wouldn't stop flowing from my eyes. It wasn't because I was sad. It was out of sheer anger. I immediately started to take action. From that day, I began preparing to move out. I talked to a colleague at work who knew someone in real estate, and they helped me find a new place. Whenever I had free time, I packed my belongings into boxes. Finding a new place didn't take as long as I thought it would. With the help of my colleague, I got everything ready and then talked to Dad.
Dad, can we talk for a sec?
What's up? I told Dad everything about how Mom had been treating me.
That's awful. I had a feeling about Mom's attitude, but, given my situation, felt it wasn't my place to say anything. I'm sorry. Dad, it's not your fault. Actually, I've been thinking. When I was well, she pretty much dumped all the housework on me, like I was some sort of maid. And she always asked for money. I was struggling, too.
Dad continued.
Even now, when I need care, it's only you who looks after me. She never even tries to help you out. I'm truly disappointed in her attitude. That's why, actually, I'm considering getting a divorce. That's tough, Dad. You've been going through a lot too. Nah, compared to what you've been dealing with, my issues are nothing. Thanks a lot.
I'm grateful to you too. I was really happy to be able to come back home and spend time with you, Dad. It was a feeling from the bottom of my heart. I want to be with Dad. From now on.
Dad, I have something to ask.
Having understood Dad's feelings towards Mom, I had a plan in mind. I shared it with him. A few days later, we decided we'd move out while Mom was away. Every Wednesday, she'd head out in the morning to her yoga class, catch lunch with friends, and wouldn't be back until after 3 p.m. We made sure to schedule the movers for Wednesday morning when we knew for sure Mom wouldn't be around. They loaded up the truck with our stuff. As I sat in the rented car, feeling a bit sad that this was the last of this house. I wasn't alone. Dad was with me. We both wanted to get away from Mom, so we decided to move out and live just the two of us. In the car, Dad said,
Hannah, are you sure this was the right decision? This could have been a good opportunity for you to be freed from taking care of me. Don't say that, Dad. I want to live with you. That's my greatest happiness. Let's keep going, just the two of us. Thank you.
By the afternoon, we had finished moving and were eating sandwiches we bought for lunch in our new place.
Sorry, we didn't have time for anything else today. It's nostalgic. I used to eat these a lot before you came back home. I never had time to cook because of work. Your mom always complained, though.
Dad laughed at that memory. The sandwiches tasted especially good as we chatted about such simple things. While taking a break from unpacking, the phone rang. It was Mom. I answered it and put it on speaker so Dad could hear. Yes?
Why are you both suddenly gone?
You could tell from the phone she was freaking out.
Why are not only yours but also Dad's things gone?
Dad and I decided to move out together, especially since you told me to leave. Is there a problem? You won't have to worry about caregiving or living expenses anymore.
What about my life? I was relying on Dad's pension and retirement savings. Where are you now?
Why don't you take care of yourself? We're in our new place now. Won't say where, but we bought a condo in a high-rise. What? High-rise condos are for rich people. Don't joke with me, you can't afford that. Mom clearly didn't believe it, but it was true. We moved to a high-rise condo close to the hospital where Dad goes for his treatments. I've told you many times, I'm still working. You used to mock it as just pocket money from a side job, but our company is quite big, and I've been there long enough to be trusted with significant responsibilities. You might not remember, but the $6,000 I've been depositing into the account each month since coming back was from me.
What? I thought that was Dad's pension. The account balance was from his retirement savings, right?
Dad's salary was never that high, right? The retirement savings were gone the month after he received them. I saw the credit card statements. It was all spent on designer bags by you, wasn't it? That's why I've been supporting the household.
I didn't know. Nobody told me that.
Realizing further explanation was pointless, I continued. It's not that you weren't told, you just didn't want to listen. I've told you many times. Also, I heard from Dad. Despite him always being at home during his working years, you'd go out with friends every day. You managed the finances poorly, spending wildly, and then complained everywhere that he was too controlling. And now you're only worried about money?
Hannah, knowing this, you deceived me. If you have that much money, come back home right now.
To Mom, family was just a wallet. She didn't care about Dad's health, only about money. Despite all this, her management of the bank account was sloppy, and she thought it was fine to use the credit card however she wanted without any problems. It's baffling how she managed to get through life thinking like that. Dad, tired of the endless conversation, took over. Even if you won't listen to me, I thought you might listen to Hannah, but I see that's not the case. Thanks for everything so far. I won't interfere with whatever life you choose to lead. Let's get a divorce.
Divorce? Wait, what about my life?
You'll be free to live as you please without having to care for me. I'll send the divorce papers later, just sign them. She really couldn't think of anyone but herself. As I was lost in thought, Dad hung up the phone without another word. Sorry for putting you through that. I just replied, thank you, Dad. The next day, we were off to the hospital for Dad's appointment. I never imagined we could live somewhere so convenient. Thank you, Hannah. I just wanted to make sure it was easy for you to live, Dad. Plus, compared to downtown high-rises, the prices here are a lot more reasonable, so it looks like we can have a more comfortable life. We left the house with that conversation. It took us about 10 minutes to get to the hospital. As the automatic doors at the hospital's entrance opened, we both gasped. Mom was sitting in a chair near the entrance. It seemed she had been waiting for us since the morning. As soon as she saw us, Mom stood up energetically as if she had been waiting just for this moment and walked towards us.
What was that call yesterday all about? I didn't hear anything about your salary or you and Dad moving out. I won't allow the two of you to live in a nice place without me.
Suddenly, Mom's hand reached out towards me. She grabbed me and said,
I'm going to live in the high-rise too.
Even with her acting like this, I was beyond anger, just remaining calm. Why would she think this approach would get her what she wants? It became clear she hadn't thought about us as a family at all, and I found it pitiful. This was a decision Dad and I made together. Please give it up. I've decided I no longer consider you my mother. Thank you for everything. But from now on, let me live my life. I won't allow that. I don't need your permission. Now, let go of me. This is a hospital. If you keep this up, I'll call the police. Finally regaining some composure, Mom looked around for the first time. Other patients were glancing over at us. A hospital staff member, accompanied by a security guard, was walking towards us. In a panic, Mom let go of my hand. Is everything all right? Without looking at the person who asked, Mom hurried away. That was my mother. We had a little dispute, I said as I watched Mom's back disappearing through the hospital entrance. She seemed weaker than usual. For the next few days, Mom appeared to stake out the hospital and searched the surroundings for us. But Mom only acted tough towards those she perceived as weaker than herself. After being escorted out by the security guard and yelled at by other patients calling her a suspicious person, she never showed up again. That day was the last time I saw my mother. Afterward, Dad consulted a lawyer to seriously pursue a divorce from Mom. Mom was reluctant about the divorce until the end, fussing and even saying she would demand alimony. But when the lawyer patiently explained that her position did not entitle her to alimony, she realized she couldn't get any. She tried to appeal to the lawyer's sympathy, claiming she couldn't live on her own, but the lawyer coolly referred her to municipal assistance and support centers and proceeded with the formalities. Eventually, a few months after the incident at the hospital, the divorce was finalized. Dad decided to sell our family home since he wouldn't be using it anymore. Mom was strongly against losing the house at the first time, but at the moment she learned she'd get money from the sale even after the divorce, she changed her attitude quickly. She wholeheartedly agreed, a sight so foreign it was hard to believe she was my mother. Dad and I sighed together, remarking on her greed until the very end. After selling the home, Dad and I have been enjoying a peaceful life. I kept busy with work, household chores, and caregiving, but the care services available in our new area are far more comprehensive than where our old home was, allowing me to hire a daytime helper and go into the office more frequently. Dad's condition has gradually worsened with age. And we've been troubled over the doctor's suggestion that he consider moving into a facility. Just when I was getting used to our new routine, I received a call from an unknown number. Thinking it was work-related, I answered only to hear Mom's voice.
Hannah, I've almost run out of savings.
Just a few months after receiving the money from the house sale, her savings were nearly depleted.
So, give me some money, even a little. Think of it as your last act of filial piety.
I have no money left to give you. Dad and I are living happily together. Please don't disturb us anymore.
How dare you call me a disturber? To your own mother. After everything I've done for you, giving me some money should be nothing for you, Hannah. Why do you think you're working at a good company? Pay back your mother properly.
Don't contact me again. Exhausted from arguing, I hung up. Later, I blocked her number, but she kept changing her number to call back. It seems she hadn't realized at first that I was blocking her, but then learned she could reach me by using different phones. Despite continuously blocking the new numbers, the cycle didn't stop. That continued until I changed my number, finally putting an end to her calls. Later, through a mutual acquaintance, Dad heard about Mom's situation. After her savings ran out, she lived in a rundown apartment on the outskirts and managed to get by with part-time jobs, having never worked before. Without any money for hobbies, she was just barely making ends meet on her own.
Maybe she's finally learning to live like a person, Dad said. Perhaps I spoiled her too much.
I whispered agreement and asked Dad, "Are you happy now?" Smiling at me, he said,
"Of course, I am. Thank you, Hannah. I appreciate everything you've done." I ain't giving a dime to those old geezers. All of my husband's inheritance is mine,
she declared loudly in front of us. The woman making this bold statement was the widow of our late son, who had worked at a major apparel company and managed a store in a prime location in New York. Sadly, he passed away at the young age of 27 in a traffic accident, ending his life prematurely. My husband and I, while grieving our son's death, were busy with funeral arrangements. Yet, his wife, despite having just lost her beloved husband, didn't have a single tear in her eyes. Instead, she seemed only concerned about the money he left behind, not helping with the funeral at all and only talking about the money, which made me suspect and resent her even more.
Let's not talk about this now. There's no will, so everything will be divided according to the law.
I tried to reason with her. But she twisted her face in an instant and screamed in a shrill voice.
What are you talking about? I'm just telling the truth. You want to take this to court? Go ahead, try me.
She stomped her feet like a tantruming child right in front of the coffin where our son lay. Her hysterical and disrespectful behavior made me sick to my stomach. It was heartbreaking enough to lose our son, but being hounded for money by this greedy woman made me almost break down in tears. My husband, while efficiently making funeral arrangements, frowned upon hearing our conversation.
Stop, just stop, please. It's before the funeral. He was your husband, after all. At least let us send him off peacefully. If you want the inheritance that badly, take it.
I managed to say, looking down. Hearing this, she seemed convinced she would get the inheritance and smirked in a vulgar manner.
That's it. Of course, I deserve it. Can't wait to see how much I'm getting. This is gonna be exciting.
The nerve of her. I cursed in my heart. She stood there, looking down at me sitting and facing down. She won't be able to see it. That I have a wry smile on my mouth. I wouldn't let this greedy woman have her way. With a trembling voice, I slowly told her. Yeah, I'll give it all to you.
Everything, okay?
My name is Mary. I'm 55 years old and have successfully raised an only son. He moved out as soon as he got a job, so now it's just my husband and me living a laid-back life. Our son's name is David. Ever since he was a kid, he's been serious and kind, always ready to help someone in trouble in town or take the lead in school events, rallying his classmates. He often got called upon by friends for advice, and he'd always be on the phone listening or rushing over to a friend's house, always eager to help others. David developed an interest in fashion and, after graduating from college, landed a job at a major apparel company. This company is a big name, with high brand recognition and numerous stores in commercial facilities primarily in urban centers like New York. It seems his personality, always putting customers first, suited the customer service aspect of his job well, as he was highly regarded in the company from the start. On the other hand, I hear that the workload is high and they live a busy life every day. Despite the heavy workload and busy days, he always found time to show his appreciation to us.
For letting me live at home till I graduated college and for covering my tuition. It's my way of saying thanks.
He'd say, and on paydays, he'd take us out for meals or arrange trips for us. For us, just having him grow up healthy was enough, but we were truly grateful for all he did. I couldn't help but feel proud of what a good person he had become. A few years ago, at the age of 25, he got married. His wife, Julie, was a woman from the same industry, connected through work.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Julie. I started dating David after we worked together. She greeted us with a bright, shining smile. Being in the apparel industry, she seemed to take great care of her fashion and beauty, and she was very beautiful. Compared to David, I'm still learning a lot at work, and now I want to support him properly as his wife too. She said. You don't have to be so formal, I said, and she laughed shyly. Her smile was charming, and I liked her from the moment I saw it. I was genuinely happy that my son had married such a beautiful and capable woman. Even after they got married, our relationship with the son and his wife remained good, and they came back to visit us several times a year. During those visits, we'd have meals together, and those moments were always harmonious, filled with the warm conviviality of family. Jolie would help out in the kitchen and keep me company, truly standing by my side. She had a charming cuteness about her, and whenever she cracked a joke, it brought bright laughter among us. In the midst of this, My son was promoted and given charge of a store in a prime location in New York. Of course, we celebrated with a dinner at our house, including Jolie. Later on, whenever my son could take time off, the four of us would go on trips together, and I loved hearing about their happy life over the phone. Both the son and his wife, and we, were living joyful days. Jolie quit her job when they got married to support David as a homemaker. They talked about wanting to have kids soon. The thought of possibly seeing my grandchildren made my heart flutter with excitement. I believed this peaceful and happy life would continue forever. However, it all came to an abrupt end one day. My son, David, was involved in a traffic accident while on a work-related trip and lost his life. The call came on a winter's afternoon. Then my husband was at work, and I was at home doing housework. It was from the hospital, informing me about my son's accident. My face turned pale in an instant, and after calling my husband, I rushed to the hospital where my son was. When I arrived, my son was in surgery. Jolie was there already. We were met by a young doctor. Probably, the more experienced doctors were occupied with the treatment. The doctor, looking down, began to speak.
"We're doing everything we can, but it looks like he was hit head-on by a large vehicle that ran a red light. The damage to his body is severe. Please, pray for him,"
the solemn-faced doctor told us before leaving. My husband arrived shortly after, and together we desperately hoped for our son's safety. However, a few hours later, we received the worst news. I can't remember much after that. It was inconceivable that our son, who was doing well at work, happily married, and had his whole future ahead of him, would have his life cut short at just 27 years old. I screamed and cried in front of his body, and spent a long time grieving in the morgue. Eventually, coaxed by the doctors, I managed to make my way out to the hospital corridor. It felt as if the whole world had turned black, my heart filled with despair. In a waiting room, just the two of us, my husband and I cried together. He was doing so well, and only 27. It's so sudden. He must be feeling so frustrated, so full of regret. My husband said through tears, his voice cracking. I was unable to move past the feeling of loss for a while, and my husband took care of various arrangements at the hospital, the funeral planning, and dealing with the insurance company over the accident. Amidst my confusion, I was deeply grateful for my husband's unwavering support. As for Jolie, losing her husband seemed to have shocked her deeply as she bit her lip and looked down solemnly. The one thing I remember is that she wasn't crying. Was it because she didn't feel sadness? Or was it simply because I was too overwhelmed to notice if she could cry? At that moment, my own grief consumed me, and I had no time to consider her feelings. But time waits for no one. We had to start preparing for the funeral right away, and despite my sorrow, I began to take action. My husband and I were handling everything, but something bothered me. Jolie, who had been staying at our house since yesterday, hadn't offered to help at all. She is still a member of the family as his wife. Logically, it would make sense for her to do what she could, especially since she had lost her husband. In the beginning of her marriage, she used to help me out a lot whenever she came to our house. So, I know she's not someone who lacks awareness from the start. What's going on with her? And instead of helping out, whenever she does open her mouth, it's about money. Hey, what's gonna happen to the savings he left behind? That's not something you say to grieving parents. I felt disgusted and couldn't help but glare at her. My husband was out meeting with the funeral director, so it was just Jolie and me.
There's no will, so I guess it will be divided according to the law. But let's not talk about this now. We can sort it out later.
I chided her. At that, she just slumped back in the sofa, looking annoyed. It felt out of place for a funeral, but her hair was so shiny and neatly done, it struck me as odd.
But, you know, both you and your husband are getting on in years, right? I, being young, will take all of my husband's inheritance.
My hands stopped in their tracks. Her disdain for us because of our age, her audacity to monopolize the money citing her youth, and her bold declaration filled me with uncontrollable disgust. That's why I'm telling you, we can't decide that now. Also, could you help out a little? I thought it was a perfectly reasonable request, but it must have rubbed her the wrong way, as she frowned and leaned in aggressively. What? You old folks want your son's money that badly? How shameless. You gonna sue? Go ahead, try it. Her raising her voice and getting agitated brought not just anger but also surprise and sorrow to my heart. I stared at her in disbelief. The bright and kind person I once knew was nowhere to be seen. The selfish individual looking down on us, with a twisted face, seemed like a stranger, and I felt fear. Why had it come to this? I was dumbfounded, unable to grasp the situation. Is this really Jolie's true nature? Hey, Jolie, what's gotten into you? All you've been talking about is money. David was your husband. You loved him, right? Can't you show a little different attitude? Struggling not to burst into tears, I looked up at Jolie, who was glaring down at me with narrowed eyes. My son's portrait, where he was smiling, was displayed nearby. Why are we having such a conversation in this situation? What? A different attitude? Should I cry my makeup off for hours? Ridiculous. I never liked him anyway. He was just a boring guy who was too serious about everything. I only married him because he was a store manager at a big company and I thought I wouldn't have to worry about money. I felt like I had been punched upon hearing her confession. I always thought my son and his wife were so loving, and I remember teasing them about being so lovey-dovey. It seemed like my son truly loved her. Was all of that a lie? My fingers trembled with frustration. It's a pity he died since I thought he'd earn more in the future. But crying pathetically like you, that's something I can't do.
No way!
I was speechless. Was this woman looking down on me with such contempt when I was distraught over my son's death? It was easy to get you to like me. Before I met him, I worked in customer service, so I'm good at pleasing older people. It felt good to have fooled you so completely. Clenching my trembling hands, I stood up, glaring at her. Originally, I had intended to leave everything to Jolie. Considering she was a young woman suddenly widowed, we had our savings to fall back on. But after being spoken to like this, I was incensed. I no longer wanted to hand over my son's inheritance so easily.
No, we will discuss this through lawyers. Just be quiet and focus on the funeral for now,
I told her firmly. She clicked her tongue loudly, flipped her long hair, and stormed off. Jolie was oddly well kept, with expensive treatments on her hair and skin. And she owned many high-end brand items. I thought she was beautiful before marriage when she was working and keeping up her appearance didn't seem odd. But now, realizing she wasn't earning her own money. And all this was maintained with my son's earnings, a wave of disgust rose from the pit of my stomach. The funeral went as planned. He was a very loving son, and we were so proud of him. He could be happy in heaven. We just wished it as we cried, sending him off. When I told my husband about Jolie's behavior, he became furious.
It's outrageous that she's been deceiving us and our son all this time. I thought it was our duty to help the widow left behind, but not anymore.
He was so angry that he slammed the table, causing the coffee placed on it to spill. As I hurried to wipe it up, I looked into my husband's eyes seriously and nodded. It felt like avenging our son's betrayal. There was no way we were going to let that woman have her way freely. A week later, we decided to discuss the inheritance again with a lawyer involved. It turned out our son, who was diligent and practical, had saved a considerable amount of money without wasting his salary as a store manager. Hearing this, Jolie, who was present, lit up with excitement. Having shown her true colors once, she seemed to have no interest in pretending anymore, openly displaying her greed in an unsightly manner.
$200,000. Really? I can inherit that, right? The wife is supposed to be the top priority in inheritance matters, right?
The lawyer began to explain in more detail while Jolie eagerly pressed on, not hiding her excitement. But a bank account wasn't the only asset. The lawyer explained everything carefully, but Jolie, blinded by the prospect of the bank deposit, seemed not to listen, appearing distracted throughout. As soon as the lawyer finished speaking, Jolie aggressively demanded from us.
So, that means I'm the one inheriting, right? You two already have enough savings, and I have a long life ahead of me. Come on, that's fine, right?
Even in front of the lawyer, though she didn't directly call us old, her lack of respect and self-centered demands were clear.
Come on, just renounce the inheritance. You don't need it, do you?
Overwhelmed by her high-handed attitude, I felt pressured despite my discomfort. Some time had passed since then, but it seemed her feelings hadn't changed. I had hoped she would come around and be willing to talk after some reflection, but that hope was shattered, draining all my motivation. She was dressed up beautifully today, too, as if she had just come from the salon, with her hair curled perfectly and her skin and eyes gleaming from expensive cosmetics. The designer logo on her conspicuously placed handbag on the table. Probably it was brand new. My husband sitting next to me was shaking with anger, seemingly on the verge of lashing out at her, but somehow managed to restrain himself. It was clear that convincing her was impossible. I didn't want any more arguments to drag on. We were at the depths of sorrow from losing our son, and I didn't want to prolong the trouble with a selfish daughter-in-law. I was too exhausted, both mentally and physically, to fight any longer.
All right, if you insist that much, fine. We're old, and you're still young. Our son must have earned for a life with you, so the inheritance is all yours. Yes, all of it.
I said weakly, and Jolie's face lit up immediately.
That's it.
The shamelessness of her response made me silently curse her in my heart. The lawyer recorded our conversation, and thus, my son's entire inheritance was decided to go to this arrogant woman. My husband and I, with resigned expressions, headed home without speaking to each other. An indescribable frustration spread through our hearts. We continued to mourn our son as the days went by. My husband went to work, and I took care of the house, life as usual. But there were no more calls from our son. No chance to hear his voice again. Every realization brought me close to tears. 3 months passed like this. The season changed, replaced by the lush greenery of new leaves. On weekends, my husband and I would go for walks in the nearby park or sit at home, slowly sipping tea while sharing memories of our son. In the midst of these bittersweet, leisurely times, the phone rang one afternoon. It was from an unexpected person, my son's wife, Jolie. Since our meeting with the lawyer, we hadn't spoken or even seen each other. I thought they had no reason to contact us anymore, and frankly, I didn't want to see her face again. Yet, why was she suddenly reaching out? Curious, I pressed the call button. From the other side, Jolie's panicked voice came through.
Listen. A demand for debt repayment has arrived at our house. It's for $180,000.
That explained it. During the meeting with the lawyer, there had been a concerning discussion. However, Jolie, caught up with the thought of getting the savings, hadn't really listened. Knowing this, my husband and I had quietly renounced the inheritance and left everything to her.
It's all my husband's debt. I didn't know about this. Do I have to pay it back? Did you know about this?
Her loud, agitated voice was grating, and I sighed.
The entire inheritance, including the obligation to repay any debts, has been transferred to you.
When I firmly informed her, Jolie let out a disgruntled grunt. The company my son worked for was indeed a major firm, but it seemed they had been struggling financially recently. The burden fell on the managers of each store. My son was forced into self-destructive sales by company directives. By purchasing stock for the store out of his own pocket to inflate sales figures. He was earnestly trying to protect the company, probably due to his strong sense of loyalty. Unable to refuse these directives, it's likely he accumulated a significant amount of debt while trying to follow the company's orders to protect it. When I explained the situation to Jolie, she let out a screech.
Debt from self-destructive sales. I didn't know about that.
You obviously weren't listening then.
The lawyer did explain it properly at the time.
What do you mean obviously? If you knew I missed it, why didn't you tell me? She retorted, her voice high-pitched over the phone. There's nothing I can do if you weren't listening. You wanted the inheritance after hearing everything. I assumed you were ready to take on everything, including the debt. I added, a bit spitefully. Jelly kept grumbling, grinding her teeth.
But you could have confirmed it with me. I even consulted the lawyer myself, but it's been 3 months since then, and now I can't renounce the inheritance. $200,000 in cash, but with a $180,000 debt that leaves only $20,000. With interest and processing fees included, I'll end up in the red. This isn't what I expected. What are you going to do about this?
I firmly told the ranting Jolie. No matter what you say, it's not my concern anymore. My son has passed away, and we are practically strangers now. If you're going to blame anyone, blame yourself for being blinded by money. Then, before Jolie could start on something new, I quickly hung up the phone. I couldn't help but sigh. How troublesome can one get even at this point? Thinking she would get a large inheritance only to end up with debt. She's free to panic and rejoice on her own, but I wish she would stop complaining to me, now a stranger. And to think, the wife of my son, who's already departed to heaven, turned out to be such a twisted person, it's sad. I wonder if my son in heaven is watching over this exchange. What would he feel? Anyway, whatever money came in and the debt, it's all up to her to deal with now. She's an adult, and it's not our duty to worry about her anymore. We'll likely never speak or see each other again. With that mindset, I decided to return to our regular life. I often visited my son's grave, reminiscing about the past while cleaning his tombstone and offering flowers. As the rainy season arrived, I diligently cleaned his grave each time it got dirty from the rain. And then, a few weeks later, one day, the doorbell rang. It was a weekday, and my husband was at work, so I stopped my chores to answer it. There stood my son's wife, Jolie, whom I thought I would never see again, her face twisted as if she was about to cry. What are you doing here, coming to our house? As soon as I did, she barged into the entrance and then started begging.
Please, lend me some money.
For a moment, my head spun. Why is it always about money with her? She looked up at me with pleading eyes from where she crouched in the hallway. I can't pay back my husband's debt. Right after inheriting, I got carried away with the lump sum of money. I went on overseas trips, bought several bags I wanted, and treated my friends. Because of that, I ran out of money to pay it back, and now it's turned into my debt. And? What about it? I said coldly. Everything was her own doing. Begging for my son's inheritance, getting excited over the saved money, not listening to the debt discussions, and then squandering it all on luxuries. Why does she need to tell me? Did she really think that after hearing her story, I would lend her money? To be this entitled is embarrassing as a fellow human being.
I already asked my parents, but after telling them everything, they said it was my own fault and wouldn't help me. I have to cover the cost of maintaining the house and living expenses, and I have no income. Please, just a little, even $20,000 would help. Lend me some money.
Looking up at Jolie, I told her with a cold tone, filled with a firm intention not to get involved. Who are you? Her face froze in shock. The widow of my deceased son is now a complete stranger to me. This is trespassing, and it's extortion. I'll call the police. Saying that, I reached for the house phone. She might believe I would actually call the police. She distorted her face in a mess. She gave me a fierce glare and then ran out of our house as if fleeing. I have decided I never had anything to do with her again. Jobless, accustomed to luxury, and now buried in debt. Deceiving her husband and his family, not mourning his death, her end is fitting for such a greedy, wicked woman. That night, when I told my husband about the incident, he took it very seriously. We blocked her number on our home phone and our cell phones and even got a restraining order against her through our lawyer. We also made sure to warn our respective families not to engage with her if she approached them. Eventually, Jolie had to repay the debt herself. Initially, she looked for a full-time job, but kept aiming too high and was repeatedly rejected. As time went by, her debt only increased, and she ended up surviving on low-paying part-time jobs. Due to insufficient earnings from her daytime job, she started working in the nightclub as well, but couldn't make enough money due to her age and quickly became haggard. Despite her situation, she couldn't kick her habit of indulgence and remained trapped in a cycle of debt. Eventually, she had to move out of her original apartment to a cheaper, run-down place. And then, the season turned to winter again. "It's cold, isn't it?" my husband said. That day was the first anniversary of our son's passing, and after the relatives gathered to pray, we were having a meal.
"Yes. I hope David is staying warm in heaven,"
I responded. I wonder if our son, who was so earnest and kind, is still watching over us from heaven. Sometimes, I find myself hoping he's met some good people up there.
Despite everything, we still have a future ahead of us. It's truly sad to have outlived our son, but let's continue to live on vigorously together.
When I smiled at my husband, he nodded back with a smile. We will go on living. Without greed or pretense, cherishing the person beside us, living a calm life. The smile of our son in the photos around the room is very warm. Hey, why are you hanging out over there? You should show a little concern. Wipe off my sweat too. You're my wife, after all. I no longer feel obligated to worry about you.
You've lost the right to expect marital duties from me since you cheated.
I coldly stated this and showed Harrison and my sister the photo I had. As soon as I revealed this truth in the hospital room, my sister was greatly shaken. At that moment, I faced an unbelievable sight. My name is Sally, a 28-year-old office worker. After graduating from college, I joined a logistics company and have been working hard ever since. Life as a working adult was harder than I imagined, both physically and mentally, but I was happy to work as a permanent employee and receive a salary. Busy yet fulfilling, I started to get accustomed to my job around the time I met Harrison through a friend's introduction. Harrison worked for a major corporation, the epitome of an elite, with a fast mind and extensive knowledge, trusted by juniors and superiors alike. He was approachable and humble, a person of good character. When I confided in him about my work troubles, he listened intently and gave me precise advice. So, when the irresistibly charming Harrison proposed dating with marriage in mind, I was so surprised that I raised my voice. After all, Harrison seemed like a person from another world to me. 3 years have passed since we got married, and I am still continuing my job smoothly. We don't have children yet, but Harrison and I live happily as a couple. On weekends, we relax by watching movies and sometimes go on drives to sightsee. My parents' house is about an hour's drive from where we live in the city center, and my parents were very close, enjoying traveling together as their hobby. My father passed away from illness a few years ago, but since then, I've been worried about my mother, who is now alone, and frequently visit my parents' house. Since the drive doubles as a visit and my husband also says he feels comfortable at my parents' house, it naturally becomes a place we often go to. Incidentally, the timing was a bit awkward, but right after my dad passed away, my sister got divorced and moved back to our parents' house. So, I feel relieved knowing there's someone there in case something happens. My relationship with my husband and my parents' home is good, and from the outside, we look like a couple without any issues. But there's one thing that's been bothering me lately. It's that Harrison's been coming home after midnight more frequently. When I ask him why, he brushes me off, saying, "It's the busiest time right now." You work too, Sally, so you should understand how tough it is. I do understand the busyness of peak times. However, he has never come home this late since we got married. So, I'm really worried he might be pushing himself too hard. Mom says the same, but you're worrying too much. Harrison said, not even trying to hide his wry smile. Seeing his attitude, I felt it was useless to say anything more and stopped the conversation. All right, take care. I've prepared a bath for you, so go soak and relax. To that, Harrison just replied, "Thanks," and headed to the bathroom. When did he start keeping such a distance? There was a time, no matter how busy, he wouldn't show this kind of attitude. Do people change over time? Or is this what they call the doldrums in a relationship? Despite the lingering unease in my heart, I decided to just go to bed and was about to head to the bedroom when something brightly colored caught my eye from Harrison's bag on the sofa. Curiosity got the better of me, despite thinking I shouldn't snoop through his things, and I picked it up. The emotions I had tried to suppress came flooding back. It was a red watch. And it was the one I had given to my sister. It was a watch from her favorite brand that I had custom-made for her birthday last year. She seemed to really love it. Worry races through my mind, but there's no point in dwelling on it. I have to get up early tomorrow, but at this rate, I don't think I'll be able to sleep. After a while, Harrison came out of the bath and entered the bedroom. "Hey, Harrison, I hate to bring this up before bed, but there's something I need to ask," I started. Harrison looked a bit troubled and said, "What's up?" but I continued without hesitation. "Why do you have this?" I said that, showing him the red watch. Harrison's face changed. "Oh, this. I borrowed it because I wanted to check the time, but I accidentally took it home with me. I was planning to return it the next time we met but forgot," Harrison explained. "I see. That puts my mind at ease. That's all I wanted to ask. Good night," I replied. Harrison didn't say anything and got into bed. But even after that, the unease in my heart didn't clear, and I ended up hardly sleeping until morning. Ever since that incident, I've had many anxious nights and finally ended up getting sick. I could tell I had a fever without even using a thermometer when I woke up. My body felt like lead, and my head throbbed continuously. It seems I've caught a cold, probably from pushing my sleep-deprived body too hard with work and household chores. When I called in sick to work, they told me to make sure to go to the doctor, but I was in no condition to drive, and I didn't have the energy or willpower to walk to the clinic. Harrison had already left the house, so getting a ride from him wasn't an option either. I had no choice but to spend the day resting in bed. If it were the old Harrison, he surely would have taken care of me, and just thinking about that made me sad. So, I tried to shake off those feelings and closed my eyes. When I woke up, the sunlight streaming in through the window was illuminating the houseplants in the room. It seems I had slept soundly. Thankfully, the terrible headache had eased, and I felt much clearer. However, I still wasn't well enough to walk around outside energetically. I reluctantly decided to ask Harrison to pick up some medicine and ingredients for dinner on his way home, and I grabbed my smartphone. Feeling sorry for bothering Harrison when he was likely busy, but thinking it's okay to lean on him a bit when I'm feeling sick, I immediately made the call. "Hello, Harrison? It's me." "What's up, Sally?" "I'm still at work." "What do you need?" I wanted to say there's no way to talk to your wife like that, but I didn't have the energy to start an argument. "I'm really sorry to bother you while you're busy. I've had a fever since this morning and called off work. The fever hasn't gone down, and I can't go out to shop. Could you pick something up on your way home?" Then, my husband sighed. "Oh, you're just being too soft on yourself." "Excuse me?" "I think taking care of yourself is part of your job as professional. Aren't you self-aware enough? I'm too busy at work today to go home, so you'll have to handle the shopping yourself." I don't even have the energy to go shopping. Relying too much on others will make you soft. Anyway, my boss is calling me. I gotta go," Harrison said, and then hung up. Stunned, I listened to the beep of the call ending and remained motionless for a while, phone still to my ear. Why would he talk like that to someone who's sick? No matter how busy with work, does he want to avoid talking to me that much? In the early days of our marriage, Harrison was the one who worried about me the most when I was sick, taking care of me diligently. He would go to the drugstore to buy pudding or energy drinks for me, and even called my mom to ask what's best to eat when you have a fever. What made the kind-hearted Harrison become so cold? Feeling a fever rise again, I drank some chilled mineral water from the fridge and went back to bed without thinking further. Harrison didn't return home until the deep hours of the next night. My health had already improved significantly, and I was able to go to work that morning. I wanted to go to bed early because I was still recovering, but I had something I needed to tell Harrison, so I waited for him to come home. The show I wanted to watch had already ended, and I was watching an infomercial with no particular interest when I heard the door open. I hurried to the entrance. "Welcome back, that must have been tough." "Yeah. Food and bath are ready, what will you do?" "No need for either, I'm beat. Unlike you, I don't have the luxury to rest." After witnessing Harrison's cold attitude over the phone yesterday, I didn't expect him to worry over a slight illness. However, as soon as he came home, I told him there was something I needed to say. "What?" "I'm already sleepy, make it quick." Actually, when I went to work today, my boss asked me to go on a business trip next week. I thought about the house, but since it's only for 2 or 3 days, I decided to accept. "So, I'm going to need you to take care of things at home while I'm away next week." I usually handle all the household chores, so I was a little worried about how Harrison would manage. He might even strongly object. But his response was unexpected. "A business trip, huh? When are you leaving?" Next Tuesday." "I'm not sure when I'll be back yet. I'm planning to discuss the details with my boss tomorrow. I'll let you know once it's decided." "Got it. Oh, make sure to contact me as soon as you get back." Saying that, Harrison headed to the bathroom, seemingly a bit happy for some reason. "What? Hey, weren't you going to sleep?" "Changed my mind. Since you prepared it, I'm going to take a bath and freshen up before going to bed." I was a bit surprised at how Harrison's attitude brightened after hearing about the business trip. If it were the old me, I might have been pleased by the change, but now it just raises more doubts. However, with the trip starting soon, I told myself it was pointless to get worked up over speculation. Yet, Harrison's brief look of happiness stirred my unease. Why did he seem so pleased? As the trip approached, Harrison kept saying things he normally wouldn't, like leave the house to me and focus on your work during the trip. On the day of the trip, despite being busy, Harrison gave me a ride to the airport, saying, "Take care. See you on Thursday," and waved goodbye with a smile. Sitting in my seat on the plane, I reflected on Harrison's recent behavior. His cheerful demeanor, the reason for his late returns, and the red watch found in his bag came to mind. As I pondered what these could mean, I was filled with anxiety. But without any solid evidence, I told myself the business trip was still ahead and focused on heading to my destination. Then, I opened my smartphone's contact list to call home. "Hello? Hey, it's Sally." "Mom? Oh, it's rare for you to call. What's up? Aren't you supposed to be at work?" "No, actually, I'm on a business trip. I had some time, so I thought I'd call. I haven't been in touch since I last visited home. Are you okay? No cold or anything?" A business trip sounds almost like a little vacation. "What are you talking about?" "It's work, all work. Your love for travel really hasn't changed, has it?" I then asked, "Hey, how's Kate doing lately? Anything new with her?" "Oh, Kate's doing well as always. She's going to work and all." "Oh, but actually, she took the day off today. The house has been buzzing since this morning, and it got me up earlier than usual." "She took a day off? Does she have some special plans or something?" My heart started to feel uneasy. "Yeah, actually, she's been preparing to go out since this morning. She's about to leave, right? I get the feeling she's dressed up more than usual. Maybe she's got a new boyfriend?" I speculated. My anxiety grew, and my heartbeat quickened just when I was trying to confirm my worries. While I was lost for words, my mom kept talking. "She finally found someone new, huh? I'm happy for her." Slowly, I moved the phone away from my ear, feeling my mom's voice fade as I eventually ended the call. Leaning against the door, I stared intently at my smartphone's screen. After a while, I opened the call screen again and pressed the dial button. That night, after finishing work and returning to the hotel, I lay in bed feeling as if a weight was crushing me with fatigue. Of course, during work, I focused on the meetings with clients, not letting thoughts of those two distract me. At this point, there's no concrete evidence of an affair. So, there's no use in dwelling on it. Yet, my brain was working overtime, trying to fit any potential evidence to the case. Wondering when and if Harrison and Kate have been together lately, or maybe Kate was just dressing up for herself. And maybe Harrison was just really busy with work. But then, why did he seem so elated that time? Why didn't he show any concern when I caught a cold? I thought about calling my mom again, but asking the same questions several times a day would raise suspicion, and even if the two were meeting, it's not likely my sister would tell the truth to our mom. Oh, this is pointless, let's just focus on work for now, I decided to switch gears. Then, on Thursday night, after successfully completing the 3-day business trip, I was relaxing on the sofa at home. Unusually, Harrison had already come home, and we spent some quiet time together for the first time in a while. Everything was okay at home while I was away? Yeah, no problems at all. And the 3 days went by quicker than I thought. Really? It felt quite long to me. But I'm relieved the house isn't as messy as I imagined. Did you eat out? Yeah, mostly fast food. I managed to do the laundry even without Sally here. That's good. Oh, I bought some sweets, let's have them together. Sounds good, he replied, and I quickly prepared some tea and snacks. It was rare for us to enjoy a peaceful conversation together. This might be the perfect opportunity to clear up those suspicions. By the way, what were you up to while I was on the business trip? Oh. Work, obviously. You're not thinking I was meeting some other woman, are you? Sorry, I didn't mean it like that. I was just wondering what you were up to since it's the first time you've been alone since we got married. We always go back to our parents' house together, after all. I casually brought up the topic of going home, but Harrison's reaction didn't change. Speaking of going home, it reminded me of something. I talked to Mom for the first time in a while on the way back. I was surprised to hear that Kate might have a boyfriend. She hasn't been with anyone since her divorce. Kate has a boyfriend? But that's good for her, starting anew, right? That's great. Yeah, it is. Harrison was completely unfazed and casually ate the cake I had brought back as souvenirs. Seeing how calm he was, I didn't feel like pursuing the topic any further, and it ended there. A few days later, it was decided that Harrison would be going on a business trip to another region. Unlike my trip, this one seemed to be a long-term assignment. If successful, it could significantly boost his standing within the company, even possibly leading to an unprecedented promotion. Harrison was quite enthusiastic. Because of that, he has been coming home late almost every night, busy with preparations for the trip. Watching his buoyant demeanor, I had a hunch. It was eerily similar to his reaction when I told him about my own business trip. The night before his departure, Harrison had to run out to the convenience store after realizing he forgot to buy something. I took this as the perfect opportunity to check his suitcase, heading to the bedroom. Luckily, the suitcase was left open and easily accessible. Looking for evidence, I peered inside the suitcase, and its contents were suspicious at first glance. Is this really preparation for a business trip? A travel guidebook was hidden intentionally, and on top of it were notes with reservations times for popular restaurants and new, stylish clothes that didn't seem work-related. It looked like plans for a trip with someone. The next moment, I was shocked. Could it really be? The next day, Harrison left the house early in the morning. He wasn't wearing the stylish clothes I saw the day before, but his usual suit. After confirming the door was closed, I immediately tried to contact my parents' home. But no matter how long I waited, there was no answer. Anxiously, I headed to my workplace. Then, an unexpected development awaited me. In the morning, I was at a loss for words when I received a sudden call from the hospital. "Hello, this is Westside Hospital. May I speak to Mrs. Harrison Smith?" "Yes, that's me." "What happened?" "We will explain the details when you arrive. Your husband has been injured and we ask that you come as soon as possible." I learned that Harrison had slipped and fractured his leg while at a spa resort and was urgently transported to a nearby hospital. Thankfully, his life was not in danger. I immediately informed my boss of the situation and rushed to the hospital. On the way, I also contacted Harrison's company. Normally, if he was on a business trip, the company would have been informed of his whereabouts. "I'm really sorry to trouble you, but this is Harrison Smith's wife, Sally Smith. I heard my husband was hospitalized during his business trip." When I said this, I was met with a surprising statement from my husband's boss who answered the phone. "What do you mean Harrison has been hospitalized during his business trip? We only have a report that he took a long vacation, and I heard he was traveling with his wife." That was the response I got. This confused me, but I quickly understood the situation and it became clear that Harrison had lied about going on a business trip and had actually gone on a vacation. Moreover, he had told his company that he was traveling with me and had taken leave for it. Hearing this, my anger towards Harrison surged, but at the same time, the fact that he was suffering from a fracture complicated my feelings as I rushed to the hospital. The hospital was located about 2 hours from the city center in a resort area. Upon arrival, I completed the check-in process and headed to Harrison's hospital room. As expected, my sister Kate was there, taking care of Harrison. He himself had fractured his right leg and was in a pitiful state with a large bandage wrapped around it. He mumbled pitifully, "I'm so sorry it had to come to this." But in my mind, anger won out over sympathy for him. "Hey, why are you just hanging around there? Show a little concern, will you? Wipe off my sweat too. You're my wife, after all. I no longer feel any obligation to worry about you. No matter how tough it gets for you." "What do you mean?" "I was just busy with work. And I got injured because I was too tired." My husband tried to excuse himself, but his words no longer held any weight for me. "Just keep piling up the lies. Pretending to work when you were just out having fun." "What did you say?" Harrison said, his face turning red, and he tried to move. But in the next moment, he lost his balance and fell from the bed. Then he screamed in pain. When the nurse rushed in to ask about the situation, I just coldly looked down at my betrayed husband. "You just fell on your own. You've lost the right to expect any marital duties from me since you cheated." I coldly stated this and showed Harrison and Kate the photo I had been holding. Yes, on the day I told Harrison I was going on a business trip, I felt something off about Harrison's satisfied behavior and Kate's actions, so I hired a detective to monitor the two of them together over 3 days. As a result, I was able to obtain evidence of their infidelity. The photos provided clearly captured the moments of Harrison meeting up with Kate at a hotel. As soon as I revealed this truth in the hospital room, Kate was greatly shaken. She desperately denied it, saying, "No, it's not me, the real person isn't me," while opening the curtain to the next bed. At that moment, I faced an unbelievable sight. Behind the curtain was my mother. And she was more severely injured than Harrison. Faced with this situation, my mind was in turmoil.
"Wait, why is Mom here?"
Then Kate began to speak calmly. "Listen to the truth. Harrison's affair wasn't with me. It was actually with Mom." This shocking revelation left me frozen. It was true that my mother and Harrison had been traveling together, and an accident in a mixed-gender bath led them both to be rushed to the hospital. Kate continued to explain how much our mother had been struggling since our father's death, how envious she had been of my relationship with my husband, and that she had been in contact with Harrison behind my back. I don't want to hear any excuses anymore. To my mother, who apologized with a sorry, that's all I could say. This whole situation is beyond abnormal. And you knew everything from the start, I said, feeling disappointed in Kate. The reality that my mother and my sister's husband were involved was hard to accept. Why did you keep silent about it? To my question, Kate sighed. Ever since Harrison and Mom started their affair, I've been desperately trying to fix things without you knowing. Then, Mom asked me to pretend to be the affair partner in case things got exposed. I couldn't say no. Hearing this made me angry. Did you even consider me for a moment during all this? Kate answered quietly. It was a tough time for me too. I wanted to do something about Mom's loneliness. And I felt she became happier since Harrison started coming around. I was speechless. My own family was this selfish and morally corrupt. And there's this evidence too, Kate said as she pulled out an IC recorder. She had recorded conversations between Harrison and my mother, just in case, to prove her own innocence. When she pressed play, Harrison and my mother's voices were clearly recorded. Their conversation, and their laughter talking about me, was audible. At that moment, Harrison suddenly exclaimed, "No! That woman came on to me. I tried to reject her, but she kept coming after me every time." I stared at Harrison calmly. Do you really think that? Then why are you talking so happily here? And to Harrison's words, my mother retorted indignantly. You're the one who said you were drawn to the allure of an older woman and approached me. Stop lying. Just because you're a bit younger doesn't mean you can be so delusional. Both parties were blaming each other, but who seduced whom first is no longer important. I don't want to be involved in this anymore. I still have work to clean up. Sally, you have your sister, after all. Kate said, trying to leave, but I stopped her. Wait, you're not innocent in this. You're a perpetrator too. What? How can you say that? Sure, my mother and Harrison's betrayal is unforgivable. But Kate, knowing the truth and cooperating with the deception, is just as responsible. I plan to demand compensation from all of them and never let them forget the pain of betrayal. A few days later, I hired a lawyer to proceed with the divorce from Harrison. I was also successful in obtaining a significant settlement from him and my mother. It was later revealed that the reason for Kate's divorce was her own infidelity. So, it makes sense why she could act this way. And Kate is still trying to reconcile with her ex-husband, but has been firmly rejected. As for Harrison, after being discharged, he returned to work, but the atmosphere was quite uncomfortable for him. His bad reputation spread throughout the company, and he was eventually transferred to a regional branch, where he is isolated. Meanwhile, my mother has been forced into a wheelchair life due to the accident and is spending her days in bitterness being cared for by Harrison. This self-inflicted situation couldn't be more fitting for them. I've completely cut ties with them and decided never to associate with them again. For now, I plan to enjoy my single life and focus on my work instead.